Yes, sir, ladies and gents. Once again, the dynamic duo is back. Okay, King Tiberius Swan done. Another Tuesday evening. Another a great weekend of sports. Obviously, the NCAA tournament, both the NCAA Final Fours for both men and women were completed. So we're gonna touch on that. We're gonna keep it real short, real compact for y'all today. Give y'all about a good strong hour today. We're gonna touch on both men's and women's Final Fours today, and then also because we are in April now, and you know what's right around the corner, right here at the end of the month, a few weeks away.
Easter.
Not Easter.
We have an Easter egg hunt this weekend, right?
Not Easter, bro. Well, for us sports addicts, you know what I'm saying? We got the NFL draft coming up at the end of the month. And so as these weeks progress, you're gonna see us slowly really kind of dive into the NFL draft. So today we're just gonna kind of give it a start, and we're gonna kind of talk about the strongest and weakest position groups in this 2023 NFL draft show. So it should be interesting. You're probably going to hear, some names that you probably already heard about, maybe some names that you didn't, but we're going to kind of, give our take on the strongest and weakest position groups in the NFL draft. So, like I said, once again, we're going to hit y'all with a good, strong hour today. It's going to be a really, really fun show, really great show, man. Kenny, how you feeling, bro?
Man, I'm feeling good.
We got Kenny back in full effect, after a short
hiatus, right?
Short hiatus,
Yeah.
Right back like you left something, man. I'm excited, man. You about ready to get into this thing?
I am ready to get into this thing. Let's get into this intro, man.
All right, Will. Let's hit them with the intro, and we'll be right back at you. And just like that, we are back. And like I said, man, we want to kind of get into the NCAA men's and women's Final Four national championships.
Pretty eventful.
Yeah, it was. I feel like, and I'll get to this in a minute, I feel like the men probably had the better tournament games, but the women definitely had the better
finale.
Yeah.
Okay. I can see that.
They did, man. And it was a great weekend for college basketball fans, especially that women's championship game. And we'll get to that in a second. But first I wanted to start off with the men's Final Four. You had San Diego State beat Florida Atlantic on a last second shot, like literally at the buzzer. And they ended up advancing to the championship game to play UConn, who made pretty quick work of the Miami Hurricanes in the other Final Four game. And then in the championship game, you see UConn. They held off a little slight run by San Diego State in the second half, but ultimately, man, I mean, UConn really pretty much controlled this game from beginning to end. So I'm gonna dive in a little bit. So let me say this about UConn. For anyone who was watching college basketball this season, this UConn team really showed themselves to be, a really good team early in the season. I say probably from the beginning of the season up until maybe about January, they were one of the best teams in the nation. They were a top 10. I believe they spent a little time in the top 5 in the rankings as well. They hit a little spurt where I want to say they lost 5 of 6 or 6 of 7, and they weren't playing good basketball. And so people kind of,
counted them out a little bit.
They did. But they pulled it, they reeled it back in, got it back together. They ended the season well. I think they won the Big East championship. Don't quote me on that. I think they won the Big East championship. And then they got into the tournament, and they ended up winning every game in this tournament by double digits.
Yeah.
Which I seen a stat that said It hadn't been done in the last maybe 30 years or so. It had only been done twice before, and that was the 2018 Villanova Wildcats and then the 2009 Kansas Jayhawks. So yeah, man. I mean, UConn really just showed, why they were considered one of the better teams in the nation earlier in the season, and they in a tournament where, coming into the tournament, no one really seen any strong or any dominant teams. In a tournament where you've seen all kinds of upsets. I mean, for gosh sake, three of the Final Four teams had never been to the Final Four in the history of their programs. But ultimately, you've seen a UConn Husky team who proved themselves to be the best team in the nation. And I think that, when we talk about, in college basketball, we call them the blue bloods, your Dukes, your Kentuckys, your North Carolinas, your UCLAs. I think it's about time that we start putting, UConn into that conversation.
And Coach K said that.
Yeah. This is a team that they've won 5 national titles since 1999. They won, I believe, 3 of them. And oh my God, Jim Calhoun. Jim Calhoun was UConn's coach for a number of years. I want to say over 25 years. And he was their coach for their first 3 titles. And then I think that was 2013. They won with Kevin Ollie, former NBA player Kevin Ollie. He was coaching them. That was Shabazz Napier was there that year.
Yeah.
And then this year, you got, I think Danny or Bobby Hurley. I get the Hurleys mixed up. They both coach. But anyway, one of the Hurley brothers. Anyway, he's coaching them this year. And to see what he went through upon taking the job, this team a few years back, they got caught up in some, NCAA allegations, and it really kind of, tore the program apart. And to really see him kind of build it up, when he took the job, he said, we're coming, you know what I'm saying? And he meant that. And to see the way he's went about, building this program back up and bringing them back to prominence, especially in the Big East now, coming out of a Big East conference that is nowhere near what it was back in the day, because there was a time where the Big East Conference was the premier conference. You had your Georgetowns, your St. John's, your Syracuses. There was a time when the Big East Conference was it. And now to see how they've kind of fallen from grace as far as a conference, but for him to still be able to build this program back up and bring them back to national notoriety and to build a national powerhouse again, and for them to end up on top with a national championship, I mean, just I tip my caps to him, man, because they went through a lot, and I feel like they should be considered when you mention your UCLAs, your Duke, Kentuckys, North Carolinas, Kansas. When you mention those teams, I feel like now you should mention the UConn Huskies as well, because they've earned that right.
So let me ask you this before we actually get into, because I know we're going to talk a little bit about San Diego State and what they've done. Obviously, we don't want to take any credit from UConn, but could the question be asked that they were a talented team that took advantage of a tournament where it was just a lot of parity and you had so many upsets? Right, because I mean, I think we can go ahead and agree that maybe it looks a little bit different if they have to see a UCLA, if they have to see a Gonzaga, if they have to see an Alabama. Now, granted, obviously those things didn't happen. So could the question be asked that maybe they just took advantage of a pretty, I would say, a weak Final Four, as opposed to them just being? Do you think that we get the same result if these other teams that we thought would be here are there?
Well, Texas, I think Houston. So since we're throwing it out there, I think that's a very valid question to be asked.
Okay.
At the end of the day, this tournament is one and done. So a lot of times it's not about the best team winning, but who's the best team on on any given night. Kind of like the Super Bowl, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I was
Like
about to
the NFL
say,
playoffs.
yeah, I was about
You
to
know what I'm
say, yeah,
saying?
okay.
A lot of
That's my first
times the
thought.
best team don't win, but whoever's the best on that given night will win, you know.
Mhm.
And that's the thing. That's what makes the tournament so great. You look at their opponents. They beat Iona, you know, in the first round. St. Mary's, Arkansas. They ended up beating what I thought was a really good Gonzaga team, and they handled them pretty heavily
Right.
in the Elite Eight. And then they beat what I thought was an underrated Miami team in their Final Four game before San Diego State in the championship game. I can't think of what side of the bracket they were on. If I'm not mistaken, they were down there on Kansas's side of the bracket. I think if they would have ran into a Kansas, I think
It'd have been different. It'd have been a different story.
possibly even. I mean, what Miami? I mean, even if I know in my bracket, I know I had Texas, you know, getting to the Final Four, but even if we're talking about some teams like, and I'm gonna say Texas and Houston for a reason,
Right,
you know,
right.
the Final Four was held in Houston,
Right.
and so
Whew,
I
that'd have been some
actually
unfair
that would have
home
been
courting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if Texas or if Houston would have got to the Final Four, you
It'd have
know,
been
and
nuts.
they got to
Yeah.
run into one of those teams? I mean,
Yeah.
good luck with that. But like you said, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from them. And correction, they lost the Big East championship game to Marquette. Sorry, so they lost the Big East championship game to Marquette. But I mean, they were yet and still they were playing some pretty good ball heading into the tournament. And this was a really good, really sound overall, you know, team. When you look at this team and really the Final Four in general, there's not a lottery pick. There may not. I mean, UConn, you know, they got this kid Jordan Hawkins who may be a first rounder. You may hear his name called at the back of the first round. You know, depending
I
on
think that.
how he works out or whatever. You
Yeah.
know, he's a pretty solid shooter. You may hear his name being called toward the back of the first round,
Top
but
20, 25 kid.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, with UConn and with, you know, all the teams in the Final Four, you know, there really isn't a single kid that you thought that you think like, okay, he's gonna do something phenomenal at the next level, or you know, he's gonna be a lottery pick, you know. But what you seen in UConn was a
Okay.
really good, total, complete team.
And you know what? I'll say this. You know, you mentioned some of the matchups that they have, that they've gotten throughout this tournament. I think that outside of them being a good team, I think they caught some very favorable matchups. I
Oh
could
yeah,
honestly argue, you know, kind of switching over and talking a little bit about San Diego State. I could argue that if this is Miami, that this is a completely different game, because I think that San Diego State has, and it's not a knock on Miami, but I think we look at what San Diego State does well. It is being a very physical defensive team. That's their identity.
mm-hmm.
We can go ahead and agree they're not an offensive team by any means. I can't think of one person on that team that I would call a true offensive threat.
Hello.
But I think running into this game against UConn, this was the first team that they weren't going to just be able to outmuscle and outbully because UConn has size. You know, and then you one thing you started to see in this game was, first of all, I think they still did a great job defensively considering who they were playing.
I think they gave the best
Yeah.
they did the best they could. They gave a phenomenal effort on the defensive end.
But for the first time, they played against a team, and I can say this about UConn, who was big and talented enough that once again, you weren't gonna just go in there and outmuscle them and bully them and smother them in the same way that they did Alabama, right? One or two games earlier. So that's really kind of how I look at it, especially when you're looking at San Diego State. They just were a defensive team that ran into a bad matchup, and they weren't able to lean on their strength.
Agreed. And I'll say this too, you know, like, and I think I put this in the chat yesterday during the game, like, you know, they don't have a single player who can create any offense for himself or for anyone else on that team. Like they have no sort of shot creator or any sort of guy who can just create offense in any manner. You know, what you seen was a team who played extremely hard defensively. and they were able in a lot of games to just kind of be able to make some timely buckets. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Even looking at, even going back to their Final Four game, Florida Atlantic controlled the majority of that game.
They did, yeah.
And you seen San Diego State make a run in the game, and then you get a missed free throw from Florida Atlantic, and all in a blink of an eye, I think his name was Lamont Butler. He goes down there, makes a little move, and he gets a mid-range jumper. Although I think it was a little bit of a defensive
lapse.
They kind of, and I'm not gonna get into too many of those X's and O's. But with that being said, I mean, hey, he went down there and made a shot, and they moved on. But they don't have anyone that can really create offense. Now, what I will say is that I think that this was a good the only word that comes to mind is exhibition. This is a good exhibition for them, because I think them getting all the way that far and getting to that level, I think that it'll kind of draw, it may draw more,
it'll make it more attractive.
5-star guys. Yeah, it might make them more attractive to more 4 and 5-star guys, even in the California area. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, obviously, what the big name we know went there was, Kawhi Leonard.
Right.
But yeah, I think them getting that far and having this greater effort, I think it may draw more, bigger name recruits coming out of high school. So we'll see what happens for them. I think their coach has only been there. I think he's only been their coach a couple years now, because they had Steve Fisher, I think his name is. They had Fisher forever. And then he finally retires. And then I can't think of the coach name now, but he just took over like literally a couple years ago, man. And to see him get them to the Final Four, man, I mean, he deserves as we say in the service, a Bravo Zulu,
Bravo Zulu. and one thing I want people to realize about San Diego State is, I think he kind of hit it right on the head, talking about attracting more 4 or 5-star guys. A lot of the guys that they have, these are just local. I mean, local, you get guys from the IE, Riverside, Moreno Valley, which is also where Kawhi Leonard's from.
Right.
You're getting a lot of local guys that just obviously went to San Diego State because they had a shot. They maybe didn't get offers to some of these bigger programs, and they developed in that system for, 2 to 3 years. And a lot of these guys are juniors, and, maybe you get some sophomores with seniors. So this isn't like a team that made its name on just being talented. They had a really good system that they follow, and that's what ultimately got them to this point. But hell, if they take and learn from this, and they say we need to add 1 or 2 playmakers into this system, and obviously I have to look at it, see how many guys that they'll have returning for the 2023 season.
Yeah.
But they can be right back where they are, because this is a very, 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 I would say a very strong defensive scheme. And as we know, and we've seen in this tournament, defense travels. If they had one guy
who could just create some sort of offense
that said, I got this. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And then Coach Dutcher, that's his name. Dutcher. Brian Dutcher, that's his name. He took over for Steve Fisher. Steve Fisher, very known name in college basketball as far as coaches go. Steve Fisher Steve Fisher had coached at San Diego State for quite some time before he retired a few years back. Just as a little nugget, Steve Fisher was actually the coach of the Fab Five.
Right.
So just a little nugget, and then he went on coach at San Diego State for quite some time. But yeah, man. I mean, hopefully they can get some better recruits in there. I think this is a good show for them. I'm not sure who's returning next year for them either.
Got to look at it, yeah.
But I think they're in the Mountain West, I believe. Which I mean, there's not a lot of competition for them there. So I don't see no reason why they can't get back.
Yeah. And I think honestly, more than anything, before we switch over to the women, I think it's just for San Diego State developing an offensive identity. Somehow, some way. Because one thing I remember even watching them in the FAU game. I'm like, what? I was asking myself, what do they do well offensively?
Exactly.
I'm like in my head, I'm like
they're not a great shooting team. Like their guards can't beat anyone off the dribble. Their bigs are really too small to really be effective.
Mintz is their biggest guy. He's 6'10".
and even like he doesn't really have an offensive game. You know what I'm
No,
saying?
he
The
doesn't.
points
No.
that he scored are really off of hustle points or whatever.
Put
You know what I'm
backs. Yeah.
saying? Yeah, like nobody really has an offensive game down on the block, and then the rest of the team is really small.
Right.
So I mean, you're right on that, man. I mean, they don't necessarily have an offensive identity. They're really a defensive team, but it carried them awfully far. So and even like I said, even with about 5-6 minutes left in the game, they had cut it to about a 6-point game, before UConn took back over. So
and that's the biggest thing I want to point out to people, because a lot of people, I had a lot of people going to this game saying, UConn was just going to have their way, which I think UConn had points of the game where they did flex their muscles. But if you really look at it, San Diego State at moments, especially when it mattered, they were able to play their game. They just needed that. They just needed that short, small offensive spark. And honestly, maybe if you tie this thing up, UConn's like, oh shit, we're not used to this shit.
I mean, momentum is something else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If they're able to, like I said, just one guy who could create some sort of offense, whether it's for himself,
it would have opened up
for someone else. It would have opened everything up, man. Just one guy.
Yeah. But they don't. But yeah, I was saying that guy. So, but yeah, really, really fun game to watch. I feel for San Diego because they just keep getting fucking teased. They can't win shit.
And I know you out there, man. I know the people out there were, I know they were ready to just party like 1999. Had they won. I know you're right out there. I'm familiar. I actually used to live like not 6 minutes from the school. Like literally, I used to live about 6 minutes from San Diego State. So yeah, I'm pretty familiar. I know they were geeked for it, but hey, man, there's no reason why they can't retool and get right back there. So we'll see what happens with them.
Now let's talk about these ladies now, because look, you see, he getting excited. Look, this is
who would have thought? I'd be so excited about women's basketball. What?
So okay, so how about this? Before and you said something when me and you were talking one-on-one. So before we get to obviously the national championship with Iowa and LSU and how pivotal that was, talk about why you think the women's Final Four was superior to the men's Final Four.
Oh man. Okay, so I'm gonna give you the biggest reason why. Okay. I said a few minutes ago, the men's Final Four, of the 4 teams, they really didn't have nobody's really like a big name, or there's no lottery picks or anything there. In the women's Final Four, and I have to give credit where it's due. Caitlin Clark from Iowa really took the nation by storm. And she had kind of became like almost America's darling.
Right.
And I think that when you have a star like that's drawing attention, to these games, it enables you to put eyes on other players who are just as talented in their own right. They beat South Carolina in their Final Four game. South Carolina has a chick by the name of Aaliyah Boston, who will probably be the number 1 pick in the WNBA draft this season.
Right.
Then, and they play LSU. And I'm going to talk about this young lady a little more in depth in a minute, and we've heard her name all over for, we all know the reason why, but Angel Reese, I hope that people don't just, learn her name because of this, because Angel Reese is a stud in her own right.
She is.
We're talking about a girl who averaged 23 and 15 on the season. So let's not, she was LSU's leading scorer and rebounder. Like, let's not get it twisted. Like, don't let what occurred at the end of the game, fool you. Like, the girl can play.
She can.
But
yeah, she's a transfer, right? Just some clear.
She's
in Maryland before.
She was at Maryland. Actually, I think she's only a sophomore. Either way, she's going to be back in school, just like Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark's going back next year. She'll be back next year. So, but yeah, I think that was the biggest difference, And I got to give Caitlin Clark credit where it's due. You had in the women's game, you had a legit potential superstar. You had someone who had kind of became America's darling, someone who opened everybody's eyes up to the women's game, and then ultimately they were able to showcase a lot of the other talented women that they have in college basketball. So yeah, that was it for me. And then too, I gotta say this. I hate to go this route, but the dynamic, the optics you have, and I have to say this, you have this team in Iowa who, for the most part has these white players.
Go ahead, say it.
And then they beat a team, first of all, in the Final Four. They beat a South Carolina team
who's favored,
coached by Hall of Famer WNBA great Don Staley, great in their own right. South Carolina was undefeated this year. They were the defending champion, and they were undefeated this season until Iowa defeated them in the Final Four. So, and they start pretty much an all-black starting five, and then they go and they play LSU. Once again, Iowa has, an all-white starting five, and you got them against LSU, which is an all-black starting five. So it's crazy to say this, but the optics is you
good.
Got Caitlin Clark, and then you got the optics. It's just going to draw people to it.
Can I say this? And and this is something that I've maintained all week, especially since the finale of that game. The WNBA has been looking for a chance, and has been looking for an opportunity to grow their viewership and to grow their fan base. Mm-hmm. If they are unable to do that within the next 2 years, with this crop of talent that's coming in, good fucking luck. Then we need to go ahead and just get rid of the whole league. Because here's the thing: we're over here talking about Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, who are both obviously going to be lottery picks. And then you spoke about Aaliyah Boston and stuff coming from South Carolina. People forget Paige Bucher was hurt this year.
What?
And Paige Bucher. So okay. So I'm like, now is the time for we've talked about this before on Rooted in Sports. The WNBA right now is where the NBA was at year 30, year 40, where they couldn't put butts in seats, and they was about to shut down these stadiums. The league was going under. So if they can't take advantage of moments like this, and obviously you're going to talk about the Angel Reese situation, then good luck to them.
Oh yeah, and I'm gonna dive into it a little bit. First of all, let me say that, when you mentioned the WNBA, they probably need personalities like Caitlin Clark, like Angel Reese. You know what I'm saying? That brashness, controversial or not, is gonna draw eyes. It's gonna draw viewers. And then on top of that, you got two individuals that can back it up with their play. Once again, people, please don't let everything that occurred in the backlash from Angel Reese. Don't let that fool you. Once again, she averaged 23 and 15 on the season. If she was eligible to go to the NBA draft, she would. If she was eligible to go to the NBA draft, she would probably be a number 1, number 2 draft pick, something like that. Okay, she'd be at the top of the WNBA draft. And obviously, the same with Caitlin Clark. If she was draft eligible, she'd be number 1, hands down. Clearly, you know what I'm saying. But I wanted to say this about the whole situation yesterday. So obviously, everyone knows what occurred toward the end of the game. You seen Angel Reese kind of walking up and following behind Caitlin Clark and, talking crap, pointing to the ring finger and hitting her with the "you can't see me" and everything. And a lot of people had a lot to say about that, and in a negative manner. People called her classless. I believe Keith Olbermann called her a fucking idiot. Just what I believe to be a lot of unwarranted criticism. I think. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say this. Obviously, a little bit of it's gonna go to race, because they're gonna be very critical of her because she is a black woman, and she's playing for a very rambunctious, a very confident LSU team, which I think we can agree, whether they're male or female, LSU is always going to talk their shit. They're never going to be this humble team, right?
And she is Angel Reese. I know people don't. That's who Angel Reese is.
Right.
All
this is her
season. All season, she has talked her shit.
Her shit.
All season, okay. If she score on you, she gonna hit you with the "you too small." Okay, she gonna flex in your grill. Like that's who she is.
And you know what? That's good. That's great that she's very honest about who she is as a competitor and as a player. And we need to stop handling female sports with kid gloves. Let these girls compete.
Absolutely.
Let these girls compete.
Because and that's what and the other thing you mentioned, the race factor. I have to mention, a little bit of what I guess what we call it, gender bias or sexism, because when the men do this, it's not looked at
it's cute
nearly as critical as it is when she did it. You know what I'm saying? Like we in the NBA, you see people talking smack, and I hear a lot of people are saying, well, she kind of went out of her way. She followed her to do it, Well, in the NFL, we've seen players chase players smooth down the field to say what they had to say.
Listen to me. We saw Aqib Talib mic'd up on the sideline and said, "I'm about to snatch his chain." And he snatched Michael Crabtree's chain next drive. So I don't know what the hell we talking about.
Like what?
And they both got ejected.
And I said this yesterday, First of all, let me preface this by saying that this is no shade toward Caitlin Clark. She's phenomenal. And she talks, her shit too. And I love that she does. Like, I think that was one of the things that kind of really drew me to her game, is because she knew she could play and she was going to let you know that she is her. Okay.
Right.
But I think I was saying yesterday, like, if Angel Reese would have did that to anyone else, I probably would have been like, okay, went a little too far. Even though I know that's who Angel Reese is, because I've seen her play during the season. I know that's who she is. I probably would have been like, all right, that's a little too much. But Caitlin Clark, that's who Caitlin Clark is. Right. We just seen her a couple games ago hit somebody with the "you can't see me." We just seen her in the previous game against South Carolina literally wave a chick off because she don't respect her jump shot at all. Wouldn't guard her at all. We just seen we seen Caitlin Clark tell a girl, "Shut up, you down 15 points." You know what I'm saying? And throughout the season, like, she's talked crap. You know what I'm saying? That's what she's done.
That's what great players, that's what competitors do. Very few great players didn't talk trash.
Exactly. And then this is my last thing on this is my last point on it too. Alexis Morris, one of the young women Alexis Morris had a great second half for LSU. She ended up with 21 points, but I think she scored 19 of them in the second half for LSU. She had said before this game, she looked at the way that Iowa had played South Carolina and the way they played them defensively. And she had said before this game, and Andrew Reese agreed with her as well. She had said before this game that the way that they guarded South Carolina and what Caitlin Clark did to the young lady from South Carolina, she said they took that as disrespect, because, they're all kind of family. They're all in the same circle. And B, LSU and South Carolina, they're in the SEC, right. And a lot of those girls, they play each other all the time. A lot of those girls know each other.
They're familiar.
Actually, Angel Reese has strongly considered, when she transferred from Maryland, she has strongly considered going to South Carolina before she ultimately chose LSU. But she said, that was downright disrespectful the way they played them. And she told them, she said, they better not play us the same way, because we're a totally different team. And then you seen it. You seen in the first half, Jasmine Carson was 5 for 5 from 3. She was hot, bust the game wide open. Then you see in the second half, Alexis Morris really come out, get into her game and take it to the next level, man. So, I mean, I think this was great for women's basketball in general. I think people need to get off Angel Reese back. Okay, like, leave her alone. And then Jill Biden wants to invite Iowa to the White.
And I'm gonna tell you this: if I am LSU, I would say, we decline to come, because never in the tradition of sports has the losing team been invited to the White House.
We haven't seen not one loser, bro. They've been doing this since the 1800s.
In sports,
we haven't seen not one loser.
Not women's sports, not men's
period.
sports.
Yes,
in sports.
Sports. Period. You know what I'm
We've
saying?
never seen that.
They've been doing it since the 1800s, and inviting major sports winners to the White House. They've been doing it since the 1800s. Not one loser has ever been invited. And obviously, once again, like I said, the optics, it just doesn't look too.
No, it doesn't.
Great.
It doesn't look good. It doesn't look great at all.
But yeah, man. I mean, I ain't gonna stay too long on it though, man. But yeah, man, this is great for women's sports. And the best part about it is that Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, both of them will be back next year. They're both going to be right back in school next year. So there's a possibility we could see this again.
We could, and you know what? We need more of it. I want it to heat up and simmer. As a matter of fact, I want the next matchup to be so, I hate to say hate-filled, but I want it to be so fiery and so back and forth. Because once again, this is what the WNBA needs. They need narratives like this. They need players like this to come in and really light fire and make people realize that, hey, women's basketball is actually, and Swan tells me about it. He's been telling me about it for years. He says, man, I love women's basketball.
Yeah. I do think that you have to be kind of a purist of the game,
right,
to love it, because you're not going to see all the high flying dunks, the crazy handles and stuff. But I mean, as far as fundamentals, it really doesn't. It doesn't too much better.
They're running actual they're running actual fundamental plays.
Absolutely.
They're not doing one-on-one basketball.
Not. Yeah. I mean, that's what you're not gonna see nobody driving to the bucket and yamming on. You know what I'm saying? They're fun. You're gonna see a couple missed layups. That's just part of the game. But no, man, this is good for women's basketball, and hopefully in a couple of years the WNBA can take advantage of this and expand on this.
Most definitely. So obviously college basketball is over right now, so we'll have to wait a few months till that picks back up, but we do have the NFL draft coming up.
Yes, sir.
Which we all know I'm like I said, I'm gonna use the word. I'm a slut for it. I mean, man, like I'm telling you, like it's something about the NFL draft that, man, just I lose all, man. It consumes me. But today we're going to talk about the strongest and weakest position groups in the 2023 NFL draft. Every NFL draft is different. For anyone that hasn't ever really followed it, every year is going to have a different position group that's strong. 1 year may be a strong quarterback draft like 2024. 1 year might be a strong receiver draft. I want to say like 2019. You get a lot of these guys getting paid big contracts. And then this year we'll talk about what some of the strengths are and what some of the weaknesses are in this draft. But Swan, I'll go ahead and let you kick it off. Looking at, as a matter of fact, let's start weakest.
Okay.
I want you to tell me what you think is, obviously you looked at it, you did your own analyzing. What do you think is the weakest position group in the 2023 NFL draft?
So for me, I went with running backs. Okay. So let me preface this by saying that, calling a spade, I think a lot of the reason why I feel like running backs is the weakest position group in this draft ultimately is because the NFL, they've kind of devalued the running back position as a whole. You looking at guys, I just throwing out an example. You got a guy in Isaiah Pacheco with the Kansas City Chiefs, who I believe was seventh rounder. I believe he was like second to last or something like that.
Yeah, he was towards the bottom, definitely.
And you see the Kansas City Chiefs, insert him into the lineup, and he's able to make a difference on what was ultimately a Super Bowl winning team. And you see stuff like that all the time. I mean, even looking at, I think he went to Memphis, Tony Pollard.
Tony Pollard went to Memphis. He went to Memphis. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm just using him as an example. You know, he wasn't touted coming out of college. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't, or should I say, he wasn't like a first round. Yeah, he was
a gadget player. Yes.
You know what I'm saying? He wasn't, heavy touted like that. But look at him now and look at the dividends that he's paid for the Dallas Cowboys. So much so that you made a special someone indispensable. Anywho, I had to throw the jab. Had to throw the jab. But yeah, in this here draft, man, I mean, obviously, as far as running backs, the biggest name is probably Bijan Robinson out of Texas. I think he'll clearly be the first, running back taken. But I feel like, I mean, there are some drafts that have him in the there's some drafts, I think with the latest draft, I seen him. The Cowboys are 24th, I believe.
26th.
26th. I seen him falling even to 26th to the Cowboys, And this Bijan Robinson is, by far, to me, by far the best back in this draft. He's definitely, the biggest name in this draft. And beyond that, I mean, there really isn't any other name, that I feel like you can really say, is great. You got Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama. But I mean, even him, I don't think he'll be a first rounder. I feel like Bijan Robinson will probably be the only running back that you'll see or you'll hear his name called in the first round. And once again, I don't think it's just because of the running back class coming out, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the running back position is just really, devalued right now. Yeah, man.
And you know what? You're not wrong for citing them citing running backs as being the weakest position group in this draft. But then also, kind of going to your other point, I think because it has been devalued, that we've kind of taken a step back or changed the way that we evaluate running backs. And things that were once impressive or eye-popping are not as impressive or eye-popping anymore. You have to be a generational talent like Bijan Robinson to really truly get that attention. But I think that even though this running back draft class isn't just otherworldly and phenomenal, there are a few names that I look at and guys that I feel like have a chance to come into the league and start. Obviously Bijan Robinson. Here's the crazy part: his backup, Roschon Johnson. He's actually a lot of ball clubs are really high on him. He's a little bigger of a body, 225, 230. But he was Bijan Robinson's backup. He actually came to Texas as a quarterback. I never forget it at a Port Nature's Grove up in Southeast Texas. But a lot of teams are big on him because he's a different style back, more powerful, a little bit more of a slasher. And they feel like he can come in and at a very minimum be a part of an effective one to two punch tandem. You look at a guy like TJ Spears out of Tulane. Trust me, I know who he is because I watch him drag our atrocious USC defense in the bowl game. But TJ Spears is a guy that's actually like an Aaron Jones clone for Green Bay. It's essentially the same measurables, same type of game, short, a little smaller, not a 215, 220 pound, more like a 205 pounder, but runs with power, has balance, has vision, and soft hands out the backfield. So he's a guy that I actually think can be a fringe starter for some of these teams, TJ Spears. And then obviously we got Zach Charbonnet at the UCLA. We've seen what he was doing last year. Jahmyr Gibbs, Alvin Kamara clone, who a lot of people say a little smaller than Alvin Kamara.
What, same school?
Yeah, because Alvin Kamara started at Alabama. A lot of people forget that. But Jahmyr Gibbs is a rotational back. He's not going to come into the league and be in someone's full-time. I mean, I guess you could say Alvin Kamara is not. He's not really a full carry, full load back.
Yeah.
And then I'll give you one more name, a guy who I think if we were to kind of rank guys, if we were talking about guys that I think can come in and actually be a home run hitter, Israel Abanikanda, I don't want to mispronounce his last name, but his name is Israel Abanikanda from Pitt. And he is probably what that what he's probably, you could probably compare him to Isaiah Pachenko, similar size, 5'11", 215. This guy ran a 4.3 and 40. And he actually broke, I want to say Tony Dorsett's rushing record at Pitt.
Wow.
So it's some exciting guys. Oh, not exciting. It's some solid guys in this draft.
There's some potential there.
It's some potential. It just may not be as top heavy as maybe we're used to seeing. Because usually you're able to identify one or two guys and say, oh, okay, this guy's going to start. This guy's going to start. This guy's start. Yeah. This isn't going to be that type of draft. So, but yeah, I'm not mad at you for saying it's the weakest position group, because it is a little bit different than what we've seen in years past.
And like I said, I just think that, we're just seeing the value of, we're just seeing the highest paid running back in the league get cut. We're just seeing, we're seeing the value of running backs just kind of.
We're seeing the best running back in the league on the trading block in Derrick Henry.
Yeah, exactly. No, in all seriousness, what I'm saying? We're seeing guys, look, even we've heard Mixon be on the block. You know what I'm saying? We've heard Dalvin Cook, Austin Eckler. They told him he can serve. He can look for a trade. I mean, the running back position as a whole is just not valued as much, and so I think that has just as much to do with it as it does the talent level of guys that are coming out of college. But what was the weakest position group for you?
Easily safety. Easily safety, because the only name you could really think that stands out in this year's safety draft is probably Brian Branch out of Alabama. And he's kind of like, he's very similar to what is it, Dax Hill? I don't know if you remember Dax Hill that got drafted by Cincinnati out of Michigan.
Yes, I do.
A safety, but he was more of a safety nickel combination, like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, right? Okay. That can kind of play both. But Brian Branch, honey badger like game. You can move him all around your scheme. He's probably going to be a first round lock guy. And once again, play meaningful minutes from the start. Outside of that, I mean, maybe you can talk about an Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. 6'2", 200-pound guy who could play in the box and can do some things playing single high. But this isn't an impressive class of safeties. I don't want to say they're bad, but none of them are really noteworthy when it comes to their skill set. Jordan Battle for Alabama, the other Alabama safety, he's solid. I've seen mocks with him going anywhere between the third and fourth round. You have Jair Brown from Penn State, who is pretty solid in his own right.
I was going to mention, and it's crazy. We seen, and highly due to their defense, we seen Illinois have a pretty solid year. In the Big Ten. And they got a couple safeties with Sidney Brown, and then the one I like, Jatavius Martin. Okay, I don't know. Have you been able to check them out or anything? But I mean, I know Illinois was one of the better defensive teams in the nation this year, and I think they ended up with about 8 or 9 wins this year. And so, I just want to throw those names out, give Illinois a shout out.
And you know what? I'll admit I have to look more at their tape. Here's the thing. This is the biggest thing we have to learn about the NFL draft. We're so used to seeing guys who have already shown who they are as players in college. And once again, it's not saying these guys haven't, but it's one thing that's abundantly clear in this draft, just like we just spoke about the running backs, and then we're going to speak about the safeties now. A lot of these guys haven't popped yet. They haven't they haven't really tapped into the potential of the players that they can be. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's actually good. I think there are clearly probably some guys here that are going to, probably a lot of these safeties are going to play better ball in the league than they ever played in college. So there's clearly some potential, but we just don't have those guys that we can look at them outside of Brian Branch. And to me, Brian Branch, it's just his versatility. There aren't very many guys that we can look at and say, oh yeah, he's a first round pick. And I think that's why I think this is probably one of the weakest. And I've seen some good safety drafts. This just isn't a great safety draft.
Okay.
So I want to hear your strongest. I feel like we might be in the same ballpark, but go ahead and tell me what you got.
So for my strongest position group, and I kind of grouped them together, but for me, it's definitely the defensive lineman, the edge rusher. I kind of grouped them together, but to me, I think that they are easily the strongest group in this draft. And we can, start. Well, I would say at the top, but a kid who I think if it wasn't for the troubles that he got into, you hear his name probably right at the very, very top of the draft. But that's Jalen Carter, defensive tackle out of Georgia. He did battle, a few injuries. He did battle a few injuries this year, but even in the 13 games that he did play, he started 9 of them. But he ended up with 32 tackles, 7 tackles, 4 loss. He had 3 sacks, 3 pass breakups, 2 fumbles. I mean, measurables are great. 6'3", over 300-pound guy. This is the type of guy. Tell you the type of confidence that he has. He just came out recently and said that he's not even talking to any teams if they're outside of the top 10. And that's despite the legal troubles that he has. You know what I'm saying? So that should let you know alone that he's just that talented that somebody's gonna snatch him up. He's not gonna fall. Before the legal troubles came out, he was some teams had him projected even maybe going number 1, maybe when the Bears had the number 1 pick. Right. But he's not gonna drop too far down at all. I mean, great player. Then obviously you got the other guy out of Alabama,
Will Anderson.
Will Anderson. I mean,
special.
6'3", 253, a freak. I think he had I want to say he had 17 sacks or something this year.
I think this year he had 10.5. He had 17 last.
Sorry.
He had 7.
Yeah.
He had 17. He had 17 last year. But once again, that just shows you how consistent he is.
Yeah, 10.5 this year. 17 tackles for a loss. 51 tackles total, an interception in his 13 starts. I mean, just a flat out freak of nature. My Bears have traded back to 9. I would love for him for my Bears to get him, but that's just not gonna happen. This kid is too talented, a really special talent. I'm gonna give another name, and this is the guy that I think could be there. I think, and I'm being personal here. My Bears could probably go any position and it'll fill a need, but Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech, he's another kid that I think is going to be, right there for us, who can definitely be that pass rusher that we need. He had 14 tackles, 4 loss, 7 sacks, 61 total tackles. He only played 10 games because he had a foot injury that kind of ended the season early. But I mean, another kid with really, really elite talent, really elite skills coming off the edge. And I mean, this entire draft is deep. I'm gonna mention my Notre Dame guy, Isaiah Foskey.
Yep.
I gotta give my Notre Dame guy some credit. You know what I'm saying? He ended up with 11 sacks this year, 45 tackles, 14 tackles for a loss. And I mean the names go on. You got and I'm gonna mess his name up, but the kid from USC. I'm gonna just call him Thule. I'm gonna mess his name up.
Ooh-wee. Hey, Thule Tuipulotu.
Yes.
If I'm saying his name right,
yes.
Hey, he might be one of the most. And I'm not being a homer here.
No. The kid sleeper in this draft.
Have you watched his tape? You watched his tape?
No, I seen him play. I seen USC play this season.
Yeah, he is. Whew, he's pretty good. But once again, that just shows you how deep this. And I'm gonna come out and say it. I had the same position of strength, the same strength position group in the 2023 NFL draft, which was edge guys. And I like what he mentioned with Jalen Carter, because here's the thing about Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter is a defensive tackle by nature, but he could easily go to a 3-4 team and be a dominant 3-4 defensive end. So he also fits into that edge category as well. He spoke about Tyree Wilson, and I'm going to tell you about Tyree Wilson. It took me so long to really get the allure of what Tyree Wilson is as a player. Because I was like, he's a bigger kid, 6'5", 6'6", 275, long-limbed. He's slow. He's not really overly explosive off the snap. But then I had to remember, I said, Kenny, who was a guy like this that had a very similar game that you didn't like, but he got to the league and it worked? And it was Aldon Smith. who came out of Mizzou, 6'5", 270, 275 pounds. Wasn't explosive off the snap, but had such a crazy long reach. He understood how to use that length, how to keep keep offensive linemen off of him, and he understood how to use his power to get to the quarterback. I would compare Tyree Wilson. If anybody's looking for a comp for him, he's somewhere between Alden Smith and Mario Williams that played for the Texans in the Bills.
Okay.
Just bigger guys that aren't explosive, but they just know how to use that size and length to basically help them get to the quarterback and make plays behind the line of scrimmage. This draft, I think, the same way I speak about the quarterback draft next year, which is going to be very deep. This is what edge rusher is this draft. When I really dove in, I'm like, yo, this shit is deep. Like it's, and here's the crazy part. Not only is it deep, you're going to get whatever type of edge guy you need. You're going to get 4-3 defensive end, 3-4 defensive end, 3-4 outside linebacker. You're going to find them in this draft. You got a guy out of Georgia Tech, Keon White, who I think is going to be the prototypical 3-4 defensive end. Yeah, big, and he's a big kid. I'm talking about 6'5", 280, right? And moves very well for his size. Let's talk about 3-4 outside linebackers. Everybody's falling in love with the Iowa State kid, Will McDonald, the fourth.
Okay.
Everyone's falling in love with him. I see him mocked going anywhere between. I've seen some mocks where he's going 30 to 31 at the end of the first round. You get a guy from Kansas State who actually, yeah, exactly. Who and he hasn't even. And if I'm not mistaken, this was his first year as a starter. He's pretty inexperienced, but his pass rush package is just so superior to where you think a guy would be at the stage of his development. But he's really good. Another guy who his brother is in the league, BJ Ujulari for LSU. Teams are falling in love with him. His brother plays for the New York Giants. I love his brother.
I know his brother.
Yeah. So I mean, this is man. And we were speaking about Tua Piloto that played for USC. Hopefully, I'm not chopping the guy's name up. One thing that makes him, and I'm going to say this because I haven't been able to say this about a USC defender, let alone an edge guy. He is a guy that I think he's going to fall maybe into the second or third round, and whoever gets him is going to get a steal because he can play I watched this tape. This guy played all four positions on that defensive line. 3 tech, nose, rush in, strong side defensive end. And he has the audacity to have a full pass rush arsenal coming out of college. I watched him do a cross chop, and I said, what the fuck? You're not seeing... First of all, guys aren't coming out of college doing cross chops. Not effectively. That's a very veteran NFL pass rush move. So he's a guy that I think could sneak up on some people. But I can go on and on about this draft. A lot of people are high on Miles Murphy from Clemson. I think he's a Brandon Graham type. I don't think he's a good.
Which isn't a bad. That's not a bad comp at all.
Well, it's not. I think, but you have people mocking him in the top 10. I don't think Miles Murphy's that. First of all, I'm not. I'll say this after Cleveland, especially after Cleveland Farrell and then Daquan Bowers back in the day. I'm just not a believer in Clemson.
Okay. So I want to ask you this then. So, for you, and I'm not sure. I know we are going to do a mock draft. I'm not sure if you jumped on it early, but just early thoughts. How many of these, edge rushers, defensive linemen or whatever, how many can you see going in the first round legitimately?
Ooh. Okay, so that is I'll answer it, but it is going to be very hard to answer because the truth is I think that some teams are going to look at it and they're going to be like, well, you don't know who is going to be in the mid to late first round. And they're going to be like, fuck, man,
I know a lot of it is dependent on who drops and who, yeah.
Well, they could easily be like, we like this guy and we just don't feel like he's going to, you can see eyes. Here's the crazy part. This draft is so deep. There are guys that can go anywhere from top 15, top 20 to the third round. That's how deep this edge draft is. So if I were to guess, if I were to kind of, and you know what, I'll go ahead and I'll pick out names. I'm going to say it's going to be anywhere between 5 to 8, minimum
in the first round.
In the first round, because you're going to go
Wow.
Will Anderson Jr. is going to go in the first.
Mm-hmm.
Tyree Wilson is going to go in the first. These guys are going to go top 10.
Mm-hmm.
I believe another guy I didn't speak about, Iowa, Lucas Van Ness, who
Okay, I've heard him. Mm-hmm.
Is the do everything. This guy is such an athletic freak. He could be a Pro Bowler as a 3-4 defensive end, as a 4-3 rush or base end, and hell, he might even have enough athleticism to be a 3-4 outside linebacker. But Lucas Van Ness is going to go in the first round. I believe that Will McDonald, the fourth, is going to go into the fourth, and it's going to go in the first round. Miles Murphy, even though I'm not a big fan of him, will go in the first round, right? So you're looking at, and once again, this is not even considering how many teams fall in love with BJ Ujulari, Isaiah Foskey, and Felix Anaduke Uzma. He's he's become a favorite subclass. So I'm gonna go and say anywhere. I'm gonna say minimum 5, maximum 8. But you can see that many edge guys go in the first round.
And we're talking about a position, where we've said, okay, the running back position is kind of being devalued, but especially on the field, it's like you can never have enough pass rushers. Especially with the amount of elite quarterbacks that there are in the league now. If you have guys who can win one-on-one and get after the quarterback, I mean, you got to keep them. And this draft is loaded with them. So go ahead. I got another question for you, but go ahead.
I'll let you shoot your question because I actually have another position group that I'm going to say is actually pretty damn strong. But go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Before we get to that position group, obviously, neither one of us picked this group, but this is probably the biggest name group. And a lot of that is because of importance of position.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna hear at least 4 quarterbacks probably in the top 10 to 15 picks. Why, in your opinion, is quarterback not one of the stronger groups in this draft?
Okay. I'll say this. One, because it's an above average group. It's not average. It's not below average. I've heard some people say it's a bad group. I'm like, it's not a bad group. But it's very top heavy. Like, it's super top heavy. It's CJ Stroud. And by the way, and I want to say in about 1 or 2 episodes, we are going to evaluate these quarterbacks, but it's very top heavy. To me, honestly, it's CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, or in whatever order you want to put them in. Hendon Hooker, if healthy. If he was healthy,
and that's a name because of the injury. That's a name that we don't hear a lot. But pre-injury, I mean, he was right up there. Although he's an older quarterback.
Yeah, but I mean, you want that? He's 25. Yeah, right. He was a guy that was up there. After them, everyone else is a project. Will Levis is a project. Anthony Richardson is a project.
So that's why it's with Anthony Richardson, but you think Will Levis is a project as well?
Project. He's a project. He has a solid foundation as far as played in the pro style system. And once again, we're going to evaluate quarterbacks at a later time. But as far as he's still very raw, and there are questions that have been asked about him that are very valid as to why he wasn't better at Kentucky. I was like, he didn't have talent around him. Well, guess what? Daniel Jones played at a fucking basketball school, and he still was better, right? Yeah. So everybody else is just, they need to go to the right destination. The only guys I could say Bryce Young should be the first taken in this draft. I agree. I agree with that, but I'll say this. But
you know what? Go ahead. I was gonna say, what's crazy is that, first of all, Fegan, appreciate you for tuning in. That's my boy Fegan. Crazy part is, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, he's an Ohio guy. Like, he's an Ohio. So he didn't even say he's Ohio State guy. That's what's crazy.
Well, it's all gonna, at this point, it's preference. It's not because Bryce Young. To me, Bryce Young is easily the best quarterback in this draft. But I think with CJ Stroud, you get a high floor, but you also feel like there's such a high ceiling because how we seen him perform in that Georgia game. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And
that was big for him. Although they lost, that was humongous for people to see him perform at that level against that team.
Against that, exactly. And he's more of the prototypical fit. That's what only gives him the edge, and that's why I believe he's going to be the number 1 pick. And based off of what I've heard,
you think Stroud is?
Stroud. And based off of what I've heard,
Carolina loves him.
Loves him. Yeah. But here's the thing: I'm not mad. I like Bryce Young. I think Bryce Young is better for Houston because they need a guy with Bryce Young's personality, his leadership abilities, his ability to do more with less. They need somebody like that in Houston right now. I honestly think that works out better for the guys because I wouldn't want to see CJ Stroud go to Houston. I don't know if that would be the right environment for him.
Do you think Bryce Young's height is what really
of course.
like if Bryce Young 6'2", 6'3",
he's the consensus number. He's the consensus number one pick in this draft, you know. And like I said, once again, we're gonna go into quarterbacks, but that is why this quarterback group is seen as average.
And then and here's another variable, you know.
Okay.
Widely regarded. Do you think that this quarterback class is a bit devalued because next year's quarterback class
absolutely.
So maybe I don't want to say overvalued, but I mean, and we mentioned this a little bit, but some of the names in next year's quarterback, you know, class,
that's crazy. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And I really think that it's going to be so much quarterback talent next year that you're going to have guys that are going to go into the second or third round that would be first rounders the last 3 years. This year, last year, the year before that. You know, obviously last year we only had one quarterback get taken in the first round, which was Kenny Pickett. So that's how and I agree. That's a good point that it could be devalued due to next year's draft. But like I said, for the most part, it's just top heavy. That's the only reason it's being seen the way that it is. Now, maybe if we look forward 2 to 3 years and Anthony Richardson is a Pro Bowl guy, Will Levis is a Pro Bowl guy, Hendon Hooker's a Pro Bowl guy, maybe we look at it, this is actually the best quarterback draft we've seen in years. That could easily change. But if we're looking at it going into the draft, it's just very top heavy.
So I am very interested in Hendon Hooker because he was a guy out of Tennessee that I was a fan of, that I did like. And I'm very interested to see where he may fall in this draft, how far, what situation he falls into, and then B, see his recovery from ACL injury, I believe, right?
It was ACL.
I'm interested to see his recovery
against South Carolina
from an ACL injury. Also, I kind of agree with you with Anthony Richardson, though. Not that I don't see the talent, some of the gifts there, but he is a project. And I think that during the combine, people got extremely enamored.
Yeah, that's the right word.
Numbers that he was putting up in exercises and things that don't equate to the position that he plays. And then even in this pro day, you know, and he wowed at his pro day, and I'm not trying to shoot the kid down. He wowed at his pro day, but I just feel like we've seen that happen so many times.
Yeah.
Like for me, I take more value out of the combine than I do in pro days. And I don't even think that much of the combine. But pro days are so rehearsed and scripted. Like, it's hard for me to. I feel like it's very rare that you hear about a quarterback having a bad pro day because there's
Johnny Manziel had a great pro day.
Hey, Jamarcus Russell after his pro day, you couldn't have told people he wasn't the Black John Elway. Okay, the man threw the ball with 70 yards on his knees or something, and people freaked out.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
I agree with Anthony Richardson, and not to shoot him down, but I think for him, he's gonna have to go to the right situation where he can maybe sit a year or two and really kind of learn before I can see him really being successful.
And to me, there's nothing wrong with that. I think in this draft, they're intriguing prospects, but there are only 3 guys that you can honestly go to bed and sleep well at night and saying this guy's my starting quarterback day one, and that's CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, and Hendon Hooker if he was healthy. But Hendon Hooker's going to have pretty much a redshirt year because he's recovering from ACL. But once again, Hendon Hooker is actually starting to get first round buzz. So just be on the lookout for that. So you could see all 5 of these guys go in the first round. Just kind of stand by on that. But I'm going to mention another position because this is truly the strongest.
Yes.
And I'm going to say this. I think it's probably been, it could have been 10 years since I have seen a tight end draft this deep. I would say probably, you know what? I would say probably going back to, and some of these guys haven't panned out. I would say probably that tight end draft with Evan Ingram, David Ngakoue. I would probably say going back to that draft. And I feel like what's his name that played for Alabama, got drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, OJ Mayo.
OJ Howard.
OJ Howard, I said OJ Mayo. I would say probably that's the last deep tight end draft group I can think of. But this one, I mean, you're talking about guys that I would say about 7 or 8 guys who all have value. But looking at the top 5 guys who I think all 5 of them are going to go within the first 35 picks. I know who you're going to say.
My boy from Notre Dame.
Michael Mayer. Okay. So, but here's the funny part. I feel like the top of this tight end draft is so impressive that you could see any of these guys go first, depending on which team is picking. It all's going to depend on fit. To me, if you want to talk about the most well-rounded guy and most veteran-esque, no. The most veteran-esque guy is going to be Michael Mayer. Michael Mayer has a complete game. He's going to come in, even if Michael Mayer may not have the highs in his career that some of these other guys might not have.
I have a name for me, but as a comparison, who does Mayer remind you
of? Some people say Gronk. I've heard some people mention. I
thought Kittle. He reminds me of George Kittle.
I can see that he's not the athlete that George Kittle is, obviously.
But I've seen him at times be like really physical. You know, at the line of scrimmage. You know what I'm saying? And that's for me. That's the name that I thought of.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that.
And he's good around the red zone. That's the name that I thought of.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I could see a Dawson Knox.
Okay.
Right. So because there's some balance to his game. That's what I like about him. Michael Mayer is probably I ain't gonna say one of the only, but he's the number one true tight end because he offers value not only as a receiver but as a blocker. But here's where it gets hazy because you have these teams who are so in love. I've read some evaluations where some teams and some analysts feel like Luke Musgrave is the best tight end in this draft at Oregon State. And Luke Musgrave is a guy that offers balance as a receiver and as a blocker as well. And he's more athletic than Michael Mayer is.
And he's humongous. He's like 6'7", 6'6" or something.
He's a big body kid. Now, if you want to talk about, okay, I want a guy who's not going to be much of a blocker, but he's going to be dangerous up the seams. It's going to be Dalton Kincaid, and he's an older prospect. He's a little bit more mature, but Dalton Kincaid, I mean, he is Travis Kelce. He is Darren Waller,
and it's crazy because and he's the kid from Utah, correct?
He's the kid from Utah.
So I haven't seen a ton of them, but from the listening, that's the name that I hear. Like, oh, he could be Travis Kelce. Like I keep hearing.
He's the modern day NFL tight end. To keep it very short,
like the Darren Waller, or pass catchers,
pass catcher guy you could put in a slot. You could probably split him out wide. He's gonna handle his business. That is what Dalton. And as a matter of fact, that's how Utah used him. They split him out wide and stuff like that. They didn't ask him to do much inline stuff. Now, if we want to talk about guy that is raw but so physically gifted, I'll say this. Darnell Washington
from Georgia. That's another name.
But here's the crazy part. Because I talked about Michael Mayer and Luke Musgrave having balance as far as some of the things they can do as a receiver and a blocker. Let's say Darnell Washington never materialized into a great receiving tight end. There are pundits that believe Darnell Washington is so powerful as a blocker that he could actually transition to tackle if he needed to, because he is. And if you
that's insane.
if you watch his run blocking tape, or even watched him when they do the sled drill, watch Darnell Washington on the sled drill in comparison to the other tight end prospects. he is moving this thing around. Like, and everybody else is struggling. Is getting low. He is, dude. He's very, and he's young. He's 20, 21 years old. He's 6'7", 275 pounds. He's just a big raw kid, and even though he's not extremely fast, he's actually very athletic for his size. So you're seeing him make acrobatic. He is agile. He can move his body. He has some run after the catch ability. So I could see a team in the back end of the first round falling in love with Darnell Washington and being like, shit, we're gonna develop him into something, because there's just so much value there. But then you have some of the guys who are, once you start getting a little lower, Tucker Craft. I think Tucker Craft is gonna start for somebody. He's out of I want to say South Dakota.
Okay.
And then you have Sam Laporta. First of all, let's not doubt Iowa. Let's not doubt Iowa tight ends. All of them come to the NFL.
I mean, see TJ Hawkinson. So
TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle. What's the kid that played for Denver and he plays for Seattle now?
Noah Fant.
Noah Fant, right? Like they just produce very solid. And if we look at in the past, I want to say, did Anthony Fasano go to Iowa? I think Anthony Fasano went to Iowa. I could be wrong, but they've produced historically a lot of really solid tight end prospects. And Sam Laporta is going to be next in line to be one of those type of guys. So Luke Shoemaker out of Michigan, he's another favorite. A guy that's going to go set. He's going to be more likely be a day 2 pick, but he is going to be solid.
One of the more famous names at the tight end position. I feel like he's been in Michigan forever, bro. Seriously.
Yeah. And then you got Josh White out of Cincinnati, who people like. He's more of a receiver, more of a receiving, a little bit more modern day. Not super athletic, but he's a guy that's going to fit into that mode. But I mean, once again, this is a pretty solid tight end draft, and I would say at least 5 of these guys you can plug in day 1, and they're going to start for you. At least 5.
Yeah.
Right. We don't know what some of these other guys are going to do. So that to me is probably, and if we compare it to what the tight end draft has been in the past, this is probably the strongest group I've seen this year outside of edge.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of those, I mean, obviously a lot of these names I've heard about. I'm a Notre Dame guy. So, I mean, I've seen, Michael Mayer play a lot this season. I've seen him, make big catches. Like I said, he's a very physical guy at the line of scrimmage. He's really, really good in the red zone. I really compared him, and you're right. He may not be as athletic as George Kittle, but just the physicality of his game. I guess I didn't want to say Gronk because I just think Gronk is just.
It's monumental.
Yeah, what I'm saying?
It's so monumental.
Yeah, I didn't want to say Gronk, but. I really like Michael Mayer.
I think Michael Mayer is probably the more experienced in and I would say experience operating and playing at a high level. He's the guy that I feel like is more ready to step into a role and be a number 2 target option from day 1. I think Michael Mayer is ready for that. If you see him in interviews, he's extremely mature. He just gets it. And Notre Dame, just like I just spoke about Iowa, Notre Dame historically puts out pretty damn good tight ends, right? And Michael Mayer just kind of fit, just kind of falling in line with what that is. But I seen a mock draft that had him going to Green Bay at 15, and I loved it. I think it was perfect because he's gonna Jordan Love. Jordan Love
just lose. They just lost. I want to say Tunyon. They did just lose Tunyon. So.
They just lost Tunyon, but Michael Mayer, you draft a guy like that in the first round, and he'd be a godsend for Jordan Love, who would be starting his first year.
Blanket, yep.
So yeah, I've seen that, and I've seen Dalton Kincaid going anywhere from.
Hey, your Cowboys can use them. They lost Dallas Schultz.
But then it also depends on how they evaluate. Apparently, they're really big on this kid Jake Ferguson, who showed a little bit of stuff last year. And Jake Ferguson apparently, even Travis Kelce was shouting out.
He did show some flashes last year.
Yeah, Yeah, and I don't know if you heard, you had heard the end of last year they asked Travis Kelce what his thoughts was about some of the young tight ends around the league, and Jake Ferguson was one of the names that he shouted out. But Dallas had a twosome, and Peyton Hendershot, who was undrafted, and he was playing meaningful minutes. So you never know. But Don Kincaid he fits so perfect into what today's modern seam killing tight end is. And maybe he goes to Dallas, or maybe he goes to. I've seen a mock where he's going to Cincinnati, which I would love. Which would be
Lord.
my God. You look, you get him somebody else.
Oh my God. the space that he would have to operate all those weapons on the outside. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so that would be scary hours for him going to that team. But yeah, this is just a really, really fun drive. And for Darnell Washington, last person, I seen a mock which I would love of him going to Detroit at 18. And I think that would be so much of a natural fit for who Detroit is, what their culture is. They want a tough
the identity.
They want a tough, hard-nosed SOB, who's gonna get in there and move people around, and they want to run the football, and that fits perfectly with Darnell Washington. So I don't know. It's just
if he turns out to be the pass catcher that maybe he has the potential to be. I mean, look out.
Exactly, look out. And the people, when they were looking at comps for Darnell Washington, it was a very accurate one that I seen, and it was Mercedes Lewis. Who plays
who's with the Packers for forever.
Remember he started his career out in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
He was with Jacksonville for years. First of all, he came in like 2006. So Mercedes Lewis has been
and still
Mercedes Lewis. But here's the thing: Mercedes Lewis was he was like Darnell Washington. He was a big body that had some athleticism as a pass catcher, but since he was a big body, he could do so much as a blocker, which now later in his career, he's mainly really just a strong inline blocker. But Mercedes Lewis, he was at UCLA with Maurice Jones-Drew. That just shows you how old he is. He's 38 now. And Maurice Jones-Drew has been retired for the better part of 5-6 years. So that just shows you how long that guy's been playing. But that was the comp for Darnell Washington. I think it was really accurate.
Where
So, yeah.
Man, well, people, there it is. Strongest and weakest position groups in this 2023 NFL draft. And like I said, man, this draft here in a couple weeks now. So you're going to get a lot more draft coverage and draft breakdown from us in the weeks to come, man. And obviously we're going to have an NFL, draft special where, we're going to be going live during the draft, but more to come on that. Just be on the lookout for that. As usual, follow us on Instagram at Rooted in Sports. You can follow each one of us individually. iSwan_0623. And then you got Tiberius. That's how it's spelled, scrolling across the bottom of the screen.
Tiberius
519. Obviously, like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Give us a follow on Twitter. Look out for every Saturday. We got Rooted in Sports community. And that starts over Twitter Spaces every Saturday, 2 p.m. Central Time, 12 p.m. Pacific Time. And that's where you can be heard. That's where you want to come in and legit get your debate on. It gets freaking nuts in there. Like, it gets nuts in there. So be prepared. Because once again, it gets nuts in there. So be prepared. Obviously, my boy got the Sports Exclusive podcast. Got another episode coming tomorrow. So, and I think I seen a little preview of some. So, the Indian
sports in India. Yeah, we're doing sports in India. Obviously, cricket, which is the main sport over there, and then they're also, and you'll see if you guys get a chance to check the episode out. They're actually just starting to grow their boxing fan base, like just starting to grow, and so it's very insightful. Great interview with my boy Arif Khan. But yeah, it drops tomorrow, so check it out.
Definitely be on the lookout for that. Like and subscribe to that. Once again, that is the Sports Exclusives
Exclusive
podcast.
podcast, yes.
Like and subscribe to that on YouTube. They also got the Instagram page as well.
We do sports exclusive
Sports
on
Exclusive
Instagram.
podcast. So
Yeah.
definitely a lot of content coming your way, guys. Yeah, that's it. Did I forget anything?
Nah, man, you hit it right on the head. We just be on the lookout for, we'll be back next week. And like I said, we're looking at some things, moving some things down the pipeline, new content, maybe new schedule, obviously to supplement some of the sports is coming up, but we will keep you guys updated.
Yes, sir, man. A lot going on. NBA, I think teams got 4 or 5 games left in the season. So playoffs is coming up. On the lookout for that. Like we said, the NFL draft is in a couple weeks,
and we will have an live NFL draft show. So be sure, be ready for that, and we'll be attacking, following every single pick. We'll be having some fun. We might drink a little liquor. It's gonna be nice.
Word might have a few guests on, so just definitely be on the lookout for that. And yeah, man, that's we coming at y'all with it, man. So I guess if there's no further ado, much love, God bless, and we will see y'all at the same time next week, I think.
Yeah. All right,
guys. Much love.
All right. Peace.